Hi everyone, I'm Luke, and today I'm going to be going some of the web CTF challenges that we have open, just to give you a bit of a primer on some of the tools we're looking at for you to use, and to give you a bit of a jump start into web hacking in general. Now I'm going to go over some of the easier and medium tier topics, and leave some of the harder topics for you guys to work on throughout the day and maybe research a bit more, but just to make sure that you have a general idea of some of the tools that we're looking for you to use and some of the basic concepts. I'm just going to go over them now. And hopefully, if you've never had an experience with web, this will be a good primer for you to just learn some of these basic concepts as well. So starting off, we'll just go with the very first challenge, the welcome challenge. Now, this is going to introduce you to the very basic tool that has a lot of different functionality, and you're going to have to use throughout a lot of these challenges, but it's also something very useful to learn in regards to web security, analyzing the security of web pages for vulnerabilities and just web security in general. So if you hit Control-Shift-I on your computer, you're going to open up this tool, which allows you to inspect the code and the general running of the web page. And what is essentially going on here is you actually have a lot of control over what happens on the client side, which is what this tool allows you to control, and you can edit that as you wish. And sometimes that allows you to look at things or edit things that would allow you to introduce vulnerabilities. And the reason you want to learn vulnerabilities is in a lot of cybersecurity, you want to think like a hacker so that you can sort of work around how they would attack a system and then actually prevent that. So in this case, all you have to do is to open up the code and expand it, and you'll find the flag here. And you might think that that's really dumb, that who would leave just like important information in the HTML code, but it does actually happen, more than you would actually wish happened, but it does. So that's how you get the flag in this case. You just grab that flag and you can paste it in to get your points. So next, I'll just go on to the next one, getting past the post. So what we're looking at here is, again, you have a lot more control over the client side than maybe you thought previously. So you saw that you can see all the code that's happening on the client side. But you can also actually edit it if you want. So in this case, we have a function that's going to submit a name, and we want to change that from a GET request to a POST request. So in this case, we can change the specific functionality of this function that's been built into this web page, where we submit a name from what it usually is of sending a GET request to just changing it to a POST request, and then sending that, and that will actually get us the flag. So HTML hacking, and that can be a useful skill in just understanding that you can override the HTML they have, and then when your web page is actually running, it will interpret what you have put in there, not what they have put in there. You might have thought we'd look at the network tab for gets if you've any experience with this, but not this time, but soon. Next, we'll look at administrator. So again, this is looking at altering the client side and looking at your control over it being maybe more than what you thought, but this time we're not going to look at the code. We're actually going to look at memory or storage, and we're going to look at cookies. So just a bit of background, the internet is a stateless entity, and so to give people any sort of concurrency or personalization to their experience, you have to give them cookies. So you have to, so that the site can see them and recognize who they are and what they want. So if you want to have people log in, or if you want to have people have a cart, for example, you're going to have to give them cookies that say those details. So in this case, when we've come onto this page, we've been assigned a cookie, and our cookie is the user type. Now, a very common thing that you want to do in cybersecurity is privilege escalation. So you want to go from a user on a system to someone with more privileges, like the ability to access things that you shouldn't. And a common way to do that is to go from user to admin. So on a website, you might want to change from being the user on that website to the admin on the website, and that's what you want to do here. And essentially, all you have to do is change your cookie from user to admin. And this is very simple in this case, obviously. It's not how it would usually work, but in this case, that's how you get the flag. Now, you generally, we're not going to just keep the cookies in plain text. They're going to be encrypted or hashed. So looking at Secure Administrator, we're going to do a very similar sort of thing. But now the actual cookie is encrypted. So what do? How do we get around that? Well, the hint is pretty strong. It's in base64 encoding. So we can see that this is base64. Now, we can't just type in admin this time, because what it actually compares against is the encrypted version of the value. And so if we want to be recognized as admin, we're going to have to get an encrypted version of admin that will then be compared and checked, and if the comparison is true and they're the same, it will make us the administrator. So a good tool to use for something like this is CyberChef, and you'll use this a lot in your cryptography stuff doing later today, or should. So I'll give you this pro tip now, but to use this website. But essentially, all we're going to do is we're going to input admin, and this is a very simple encryption, but we're just going to do a base64 encryption of admin, and then that's essentially what they've done on their side. So this is probably a encryption for user in base64. And now if we put the encryption for admin, whoops, and then refresh it, we're going to get the flag. So again, very easy. Generally, you're not going to encrypt things like this. You're going to do a one-way hash, and one-way hashes are pretty much irreversible unless you know the way it was encrypted in the first place. They're pretty much impossible to brute force. So you won't be able to just go around it like that. So obviously everything's not this insecure. But next, going on, let's look at the juggle. Now, this is the first one we're going to sort of have to learn a topic. And the topic is how PHP juggles comparison between different types. So the way JSON works is generally it will have its information in this paired format where you have two things together. And what this is looking at is if you change the comparison to be something that doesn't recognize, it's just going to throw an error and say that it's true. So in this case, if we just say that the password equals 0 and then submit that, we get the flag. So this is pretty simple, but you just want to look into PHP comparison of different types if you want a more expanded look onto what's going on in this case. So also there's the magician, and I'll go into this one because this one can be a bit tedious if you have to go through all these PHP hashes. But essentially, again, this is a broader topic that has to do with PHP. So PHP has the equals operator, and essentially there's a lot of problems with this. And one of these problems is that certain hashes will be hashed to this, and this hash is equal to 0. So what this means is that, okay, so that hash is equated to 0, and then things that are equated to 0 when they are compared against other hashes will pretty much always evaluate to true. So what this means is that if you get a certain input that evaluates to this, which will equate to 0, it will always evaluate as true. But this is different depending on the different types of hash that you're using and the hash length. And essentially, what you're looking at is, depending on the hash type that you're using, a certain input will get hashed into the magic hash, which will equate to 0, and then will always evaluate as true. So I'm going to tell you it's this one in this case, because this one can be really annoying if you have to go through all of them, but it's actually just this one. So you get this magic number, it's going to be hashed into this magic hash, which will equate to 0, and oops, I got the wrong thing. I want the number. There we go. So there, yeah. Then you get the magic hash, and then that magic hash will equate to 0. And then the example this has is generally people will hash their when you input your password, it will be hashed, and a hash function will make it something that's completely different to everything else. But you can, if there's something asking for a password and it has a particular form of hash that's insecure, that's found to be insecure, you could put a magic hash in and bypass the security. So finally, we'll move on to a couple of the more complex ones, or the medium complexity topics. So let's go look at login form. So with login form, what we're essentially looking at is SQL. And so what you need to know is this is an SQL database on the other end, and what we're trying to probe at you to know is SQL injection. So SQL injection used to be a very common vulnerability. It was like the most common vulnerability, really. And what it was is essentially, due to the way that people processed SQL, it was possible to escape out of the intended functionality of the code and put your own code there and sort of manipulate the database as you wanted. Now, the way this essentially works is you start with a comment to comment out their previous code, and then in this case, for example, what we're looking to do is we are trying to log in, even though we are not a user on this, and we shouldn't be able to log in. So what we want to do is we're going to escape out of the normal function of code. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to check your username and check your password and make sure they are the same as someone who's saved on the database. And we want to escape out of that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to give the input or 1 equals 1. Where is this one? So it's 1 equals sign. And essentially 1 equals 1 will always evaluate as true. So when we're going to escape out of the normal function, and we're going to say 1 equals 1, and which will always evaluate as true. So usually they would say, okay, I want to compare the username to one that's already in the database, but we're just going to say, and they would have other associated code with that, but we're just going to say always evaluate as true, and essentially that will let us in and we can get the flag. And so what that would look like in reality is a lot of websites, you would just go to the username, you would just put in something that's very similar to that, essentially escape out of the normal functionality and just say always true, and then you could just get in like you had an account. You can do other things in regards to that as well. And that's what a lot of the topics further down, like secure database, are going to do, where you don't have to just log in, where you could insert things into the database or manipulate the database. But I'll leave you to look into that yourself. But essentially, what you're looking in for this topic, and as well as things like secure database, is SQL injections. So the last one I'll look at is user details. No, not user details. That's going to give away too much. We'll look at latest news. Okay, so this is the last one. And again, we'll just look at the analyzing what's on the client side. So that's really just what I'm going over, is showing you have a lot more control over the client side than you might believe. And also, again, starting with login form, how you might be able to manipulate things that you shouldn't be able to. But in this case, the last port was printed in 1, and if we refresh this, we're going to look at the last thing that's very useful in this tool, which is network. So all GET and all requests that are sent from the client side are shown here. And essentially, this one, nope. This one. We're sending a GET request with a specific ID and saying that we want the news. And what we're going to do is we're just going to change the GET request. We're going to change who we are on this GET request to be someone that we're not. So change the ID, and then we're going to look at the response. So unlike the other ones, it's not going to change the initial page. You're going to send a GET request that's a bit different to what is usually done, and then going to look at the response for that. And the response is just a flag. So there you go, easy as. And I've realized I haven't talked about it yet, but if you are looking to submit your flags, the way you do it is you grab the flag that you've just found, and you want to give it in this format. So you want to say flag and the brackets and put the actual thing that you found in there. You just want to paste the whole thing in there, and then submit that, and then you'll get the points. Easy as. So that's just been a quick primer on some of the topics we're going to be looking at. Generally, just looking at how you have a lot more control, and some of the topics that you might want to look into that are sort of well known. But you'll go into more stuff going forward. So I'll give you some primers about some of this stuff. So this one, you want to look at cross-site scripting, is something you want to search up to get a better overview. And that's essentially, this one will be quite complex, but you're going to run your own website, and then you're going to cross-site script to it, and you're going to want to need to look into that yourself. But that's just a bit of a general idea. Yeah. So ones going forward will be a bit more complex than that, but hopefully this has been a good introduction to web security and some of the topics, and it's helped pique some of your interest in the topic. So thank you all for watching my lightning talk, and I hope you have fun today and enjoy your time.